Hey everyone, it's Heather Nichols for Tailored Expressions. Today I have a pair of cards to share that are bursting with blooms and perfect for spring. To create these cards, I'm using the new Wheelbarrow Die Collection, the new Fresh Flowers Die Collection, the Itty Bitty Sentiments Stamp Set, and the Itty Bitty Tags 3 Die Collection, the Frame and Frame 3 Die Collection, the Knock on Wood Background Stamp, and the Tiny Twinkles embossing folder. For ink, I'm using Granny Smith and Peapod, green tea and Brussels sprout, guava and cherry pop, macaron and dried fig, pineapple and candy corn, toffee and mocha, and Nocturne VersaFine Clair. I'm using bitty and detail blender brushes and a brayer. For splattering, I'm using Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed-proof white ink, chocolate truffle liquid watercolor, and a water brush. I'm using Post-it removable labeling tape, burlap twine, bits and pieces, glossy white rhinestones, foam adhesive, and multimedia matte. I'm starting off by die cutting the wheelbarrow. I cut the main part out of toffee cardstock, the wheel spokes and handle out of mocha cardstock, and the tire out of poppy seed cardstock. Next, I cut out flowers and leaves with the Fresh Flowers die collection. Instead of choosing different cardstock colors to cut the elements from, I chose to cut everything out of sugar cube cardstock, and then we'll add color later using blender brushes and different colors of ink. I'm using Post-it removable labeling tape to hold my die cut pieces in place while I add color to them with my blender brushes. I've got this strip of tape sticky side up and I'm holding it in place on my glass mat with magnets. I'm placing the die cut pieces on that sticky side of the tape and then I'm ready to add color. I'm coloring this first set of leaves with Granny Smith ink using my bitty blender brush. Then I'll add shading to my leaves using Peapod ink with my detail blender brush. I'm adding the shading along the stems and bases of the leaves. For the stems with leaves, I added a base color of green tea ink using my bitty blender brush. Then to add shading to the stems and the bases of the leaves, I used Brussels sprouts ink with the detail blender brush. Next up are the flowers. I started with the group of flowers on the left, and I started with Macaron ink, and then I added shading using dried fig ink. For the group of flowers on the right, I started off with Guava ink, and then I added shading to those flowers using cherry pop ink. This last set of flowers I added color to using pineapple ink, and then I went back with my detail blender brush and added shading using candy corn ink. Finally, I have a whole bunch of flower centers and I added color to all of these using Mocha ink. These little flower centers wanted to move around on me, even on the tape, so I used my craft pick to hold them still while adding the color. Next, I'll put the wheelbarrow together, and I want it to have a wooden look. I'm taking the main piece, which I cut out of toffee cardstock, and I'm stamping that with the Knock on Wood background stamp using toffee ink. Then I added shading around the main part of the wheelbarrow and the leg of the wheelbarrow using Mocha ink. I used liquid adhesive, my favorite is multimedia matte, to attach the wheel spokes, the tire, and the handle to the wheelbarrow. I took the flowers and leaves and wheelbarrows that I created and I splattered everything with chocolate truffle liquid watercolor and Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed-proof white ink. I pick up the color onto a water brush and then tap that brush over my finger to add the splatters. Before arranging the flowers in the wheelbarrow, I added flower tops to the stems. I layered some of the flowers together for extra dimension, and I added flower centers. Then I added adhesive to the back of the wheelbarrow, and it's time to start arranging the flowers. I started with the largest pieces of greenery along with the two largest flowers. Then I tucked in the flowers that I had glued onto the stems, and finally I tucked in one last pink flower to finish it off. For the background of my card, I used the Tiny Twinkles embossing folders. To add more contrast to the background, I inked up the embossing folder on the smooth side with toffee ink. I applied the ink with a brayer, and then added the cardstock and sent it through my die cut machine using the embossing folder sandwich recommended by the manufacturer. I cut out frames from latte cardstock using the Frame and Frame 3 die collection, and then I added those to my backgrounds. Then I added the wheelbarrows, adhering them in place with thin foam adhesive. Next, I chose the Just For You sentiment from the Itty Bitty Sentiment Stamp Set, and I set it up in my MISTI to stamp on a tag from the Itty Bitty Tags 3 die collection. I used a length of burlap twine to tie a bow to each of the little tags, and then I added the tags to the wheelbarrows using a thin foam adhesive. To finish these cards, I added each of the background panels to an A2 sugar cube card base. And then the finishing touch is bits and pieces glossy white rhinestones scattered around the flowers. I adhered the rhinestones in place using multimedia matte. Here's a closer look at the finished card. From the rustic wooden wheelbarrow to the brightly colored flowers, this card is guaranteed to bring joy to anyone's day. All of the supplies that I used to create my cards can be found in the Tailored Expressions web store at tailoredexpressions.com. Thanks so much for joining me today, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our crafty videos.